Right, let's send to the story now. The expelled spokesperson of the King of the Zulu Nation, Prince Africa Zulu, says that the stability of the Zulu Nation is now under threat. His sacking comes after the firing of Inkosi Thanduyise Mzimela, who is the chairperson of the Ingonyama Trust. Africa claims the appointment of the new traditional prime minister came as a complete shock to most in the royal house. Cultural expert Professor Musa Xulu joining us now for more on that conversation. Good to have you, Prof, and thank you very much for your time. The note, at least statement, indicating the capture of the Zulu royal house by some folks with business interests and others that really have got nothing to do in terms of a relationship with the royal house. What do you make of that briefing by the now fired spokesperson of the king? We'll get into his firing, we'll get into the appointment of the prime minister, we'll get into the appointment of the chair, but just the initial optics of that kind of reaction following the decisions taken by the king.
Well, good evening, Thabo, and your viewers. Look, Prince Africa has been an insider there at the royal household in the King Misuzulu side of things. So the things that you are saying today, maybe it's difficult not to believe them. We have ourselves in our own analysis have been even here on your platform saying that the structures of the kingdom do not seem to be coming together, because you must have a Makosi, you must have the royal family, you must have other structures working together as a unit. It's not been happening. So the prince, in his own way, was trying to tell, I think, the country and the 25% of South Africans who are Zulu speaking, that the kingdom maybe is not going in the right direction. Yeah. And therefore, maybe he was trying to send a message to Amakosi and you know, Izinduna and others that are in the structures of the kingdom, to begin to take note that things may not be going in the right direction, and therefore maybe try to look at what kind of interventions. You must remember that it's 25% of the South African population, and very rural in nature and very traditionalist in nature. And if something goes wrong with the Zulu kingdom, many other kingdoms in South Africa, which are sub-national kingdoms like the Zulu kingdom, will in one way or the other be affected by this. Yeah. And so I thought when I saw his statement that he was a man that was coming from inside, saying that what is inside there is not what you think it is. And then, of course, he said all other things that he said. So as a man who knows the inner workings of the crown, he signals two things in particular that he says should be red flags for us to actually look into. One, I believe you already have put some comment on it, is the appointment or the disappointment of the chairperson of the Ingonyama Trust, saying, well, it is within the right of the king. Constitutionally, he is the chairperson, but of course, tradition has been that he would appoint somebody to represent him in that position. Just because of the sheer nature of the work, the Act requires him to respond to Parliament, to the Auditor General, and so on, and so forth. But he has decided to say, I'll be the chairperson. What do you find wrong with that? Well, the Act, the Ingonyama Act, Ingonyama Trust Land Act, which was passed by the old Zwelithini Homeland government in 1994 on the eve of the democratic elections, and then amended in 1997, provides for the king to be the chairperson of the trust. The Act, not the Constitution. But then it also provides for him that if he cannot take up the position, he can nominate somebody in his place, a proxy of some sort, to take his place and be a chairperson. Now, on the face of it, there is nothing much wrong about His Majesty wanting to be chair, legally speaking. But the logistics of it, I think, are going to be very problematic because that entire organization falls under the Minister of Land Affairs, Minister Thanduyise, and so there will be all these other many things of accountability, which, as chairperson, the king, remember, he will not be a king there. It's all regulated what he will go there to do. So he cannot say that as a king, I want this, as a king, I don't want this. It's regulated. So he will be working in that environment, as you say, going to parliament, meeting with politicians in parliament, accounting there, and having to meet with the Auditor General and many other. There's lots of legislation that the organization has to comply with. I don't know. I don't think that his, for example, background has prepared him for that. So it could be problematic. But you must remember that the late Prince Mangosuthu had lots of reservations about the appointment of Inkosi Mzimela. He was saying there was nothing wrong with Judge Jerome Ngwenya. He had been there for over 22 years and understood the institution much better. But then His Majesty had other convictions. And then, of course, it's very well known that till he passed away, the late Prince Mangosuthu was a very aggrieved man based on how he felt he was treated when it came to the matter of Ingonyama Trust, which he had established almost single-handedly in 1994.
So the Prince Africa seems to draw a parallel there to say, well, the so-called cabinet, he says, that is now advising the king or even making these appointments knows exactly that weakness, knows exactly that loophole, and that's exactly what they plan to take advantage of, because the king might not even make the board meetings, and there will be a proxy there that is going to go in and make decisions on behalf of the king.
Yes, no, the cabinet, I thought maybe he could put it in inverted commas, somewhere as they call those kinds of people a cabal. What the king should have done in terms of the 2019 Khoisan Traditional Leadership and Khoisan Act, he should have appointed or nominated a board called Royal House called Advisory Board, which would be then confirmed by the Minister of Culture and be the formal structure that advises him. So it's called Royal Council. The formal structure that advises him. He has not done that. And I think he is therefore very vulnerable because in the entirety of history, there has never been a king who rules alone. It's impossible. The duties may look very, very simple and ceremonial, but in reality, there's a lot of pressure there because lots of people come to him for favors, and he's bound to make mistakes. When I read myself and look at some of the other informations, you can see that there are huge problems there. And this cabal, even Prince Mangosuthu the late, was worried about this cabal, and he even called a meeting in Mpangeni City Hall to express his disappointment with the business people and others who had sort of, inverted commas, were seen to have captured His Majesty, and he was seen to be doing what they wanted him to do, rather than him working with Inkosi and the traditional structures and making sure that all the structures of the kingdom are in place. I think that has been the weakness of the past 2 years in terms of the succession plan after the demise of the late king, Zwelithini.
We could go a little bit more into the character of this cabal, but because of time, we'll leave it there for now. Let's touch on the other point that the statement raises as a red flag. It's the appointment of the traditional prime minister. You have a sense that some in the royal family would feel that there shouldn't be a rush to appoint the traditional prime minister at this point because the court processes are still undergoing, and therefore they feel it's a 50-50 chance, and therefore it shouldn't be something that is rushed to get into the appointment of the Prime Minister, which came as a surprise. But Prince Africa is raising other issues. I mean, he goes on to call this Prime Minister a dodgy human being, but not only that, not of the lineage of the royal family. Is that the sentiment that is shared by most in the royal household?
Well, let me say, one of the tragedies that has happened, especially after April 2023, when His Majesty and the late Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi went on a boxing trip, was that the members of the royal family in their big numbers have moved away, or seem to have moved away from King Misuzulu. So he's perfectly isolated there. So he is unable to even convene a meeting of the royal family. And then you have defections, other people, his siblings from other mothers, saying that it should be them who are actually kings. And so there are the court cases. The latest one is that, which says because there is this big court case which is now going to Bloemfontein in the appeal court, he should not be doing all these appointments and disappointments, because his future is actually not as guaranteed as many can think. You know, when there are these court cases, and it's happening also with the Bavenda Kingdom, you may find that eventually at the end of it all, a new king emerges, and then there has been all these people. So there's a kind of reservations about the appointment of the Prime Minister. And of course, as you say, the Amakos are raising the issues that how are they going to address him. And then there is the issue of his very high profile in the IFP, which has made some to think that maybe the king is trying to give the IFP political advantage over other political organizations in KZN, which would be unfair play.
Professor Xulu, I appreciate your time. Thank you very much for coming on. Professor Musa Xulu, the cultural expert on the developments at the Zulu Royal House.